Guess what I did this afternoon?
I don't know.
I didn't ask you. I told you to guess. Anyway, I called a company for insurance quotes, or more accurately, to have them send me insurance quotes.
Okay.
You ever done that?
Sure.
How long ago?
Oh, last time I did something like that was, gosh. I mean, it must have been probably 25 years ago at least.
That would make sense. I'm betting you don't have a strong memory of the experience.
I mean, strong memory is, but
I'm
okay.
I'm I'm betting that because when I said what I did, you didn't immediately scream.
Oh,
It sucks so bad. It's like all the terrible things about trying to file your taxes and all the terrible things about like trying to buy a used car on a lot, except both of them on the phone with one person.
huh. Yeah, I don't remember it being like that, I guess.
It was just so many asking me questions I didn't know the answer to. A lot of like, now you do what you want, but I just think if it da da da, and a lot of okay, legally I have to tell you blah blah blah. Like, just all of the things. It was at one point I got a little snippy because she's like, I'm assuming you got a $500 deductible on this policy because that's what most people that did you have 500 or 1,000? I was like, I can't remember. She's like, you probably have 500. And I was like, wait, I do remember because, and I told you this before. Remember when I got in the car accident and the other guy had the same company and the insurance agent called and said, you guys have this clause that if two people on our insurance get in a wreck together, we take the lowest of the two deductibles, and this guy has a lower deductible than you. And the agent was super excited because he's like, I never get to give good news. So this is great. And I remembered that mine was 1,000, but the other guy's 500. So I was like, no, ours is actually 1,000. And she's like, 1,000? Are you sure you want? I mean, do you want when you get in an accident? Do you want to pay more or less?
Do you want
I
to
think
live
she
or do
said
you want to die?
that's the thing. She's like, you understand you'd have to pay more in that situation. So I said, I do understand I'd have to pay more in that situation. I also understand that with a lower deductible, I'd have to pay more each month, which is also not something I would want to do. So it's a
Right.
balance. She's like, well, yeah, it is. And we finally settled on her giving me both. But I was just like, come on, what the hell is that? But yeah, it was awful. That being said, I think it's going to be awesome. It's USAA who it's USAA is the insurance company for the armed forces,
Oh.
and you can join if you are a member of the armed forces, or if your parents were a member of the armed forces, or if your grandparents were a member of the armed forces.
Well, I knew you could if your parents were, but I didn't know
Yeah,
if
no, she said that. Yeah. But both of our dads were in the armed forces. And so Trish has been trying to do this online and it's all smooth until she's like, I'm married. And they're like, oh, tell us the information about your spouse. And she puts in my social and they're like, you need to call us. And we were like, my dad didn't talk a lot about his military time, but we only just in the last couple of years learned that he was court-martialed at one point. So we're like, what's going on here?
Hmm.
We know. And so finally we're like, we'll just call and find out. And it actually is, and I'm still confused which of us, but one of us has apparently been a member for 25 years. And that was part of the problem because the other one wasn't, whatever, but it's fine. So, but for a second, we're like, oh my God. Turns out my dad was actually on a terrorist list or something and we didn't know. But yeah, so it looks like it's going to be good. But yeah, dad call, really terrible. It's not. And she was really nice too. Like it was the best version of that it could be. And it was still awful.
So hold on a second. Let me ask you a question. None of my neither of my parents and none of my grandparents served in the military. Full stop.
All right. Then you're a
But
coward and you should get out of my country.
but but
Stop
I
saying
don't
but. It's making me uncomfortable.
I don't know how many of Abby's parents / grandparents were in the military, but I do know one of her grandparents was. That I know one was.
Mhm.
So she could get insurance through this thing because her grandfather was in the military?
Very possibly.
Mm.
I think what it comes down to is you can get insurance if you are a member, and membership is free if your parents or your grandparents were in the military. I think. I don't know if that means if that wasn't the case, can you pay for membership? I'm not sure, but it is definitely worth calling. And I will tell you this right now, because I don't off the top of my head know enough about what we pay homeowners insurance because we did it through escrow. But I know what she quoted me on the auto insurance, and it was better coverage than we get, and it was like half what we're paying now. So might be worth a call.
Well, I see ads for them all the time. I mean, I didn't remember the name. I need you to remind me, but I do see ads for them all the time, and everything they ever say on the ads are like, "Wow, that seems like a good deal. I guess I should have been in the military." I didn't, and I think they do say family members, and so I think I knew
Yes.
from that if your parents served, but I didn't know it would go clear to your
The
grandparents.
lady on the phone, for no particular reason, because it's made a big deal about how this is a thing, and it'll, you pass it down to your children and even your grandchildren, she said. But like, I don't know if that's effective. I mean, it's worth calling. It's worth calling, is what I'm saying. So, or even maybe just going online and do it. They've got a pretty decent thing there. They just make you call them if your dad turned out to be a terrorist, like mine.
Mm. I mean, for all I know, her other grandfather served also. I don't know that, and her dad might have served. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I have no idea, actually.
I
It's
mean,
kind
so
of
the
weird that
bigger
I don't
issue
know.
here is you apparently don't know your wife very well. I mean, that's a much larger issue.
I mean, the one grandfather was like he was a weatherman in Clear Lake. I mean, he's like sort of a local celebrity, so I know a lot about him.
Weatherman, not part of the armed forces. Is that?
I'm saying because he was a minor celebrity up there, I know a lot about
Okay.
him. That's one of the
Okay.
things that lots of people know
I
about.
thought you were like Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines,
Although
weatherman.
he was his broadcasting thing was part of what he did in the service. He was a
A
broad.
military weatherman.
He might have been,
They
but
probably have those. Yeah, they probably have.
but I mean, he was a broadcaster or a news person there or something. You know, that's what he was. That's what he did. He was Stars
My
and Stripes or something. I don't know.
my maternal grandfather avoided being drafted or anything by being a huge nerd. He spent World War II teaching Navy people how to use chemistry for particular types of submarine detection. And so he got to be a civilian, liaison consultant or whatever. So he avoided the draft and everything like that.
Well, Dad was rejected by the draft because of his size. It's too big, too big.
Oh, they don't do that as much anymore. I miss that.
But
I got a lot of other shit wrong. I'm also old now, but even when I was younger, I was like, I got enough wrong with me. They're not gonna want me.
his dad didn't. He was too young to fight in World War I, and he was too old to fight in World War II.
Now that's handy.
And as far as my mom's side, I don't know what happened there. I don't know why her dad didn't. He didn't serve in any military at all.
I mean, it's always hard to say because they didn't draft every man in the country for World War II.
Right.
So every time it's like, how come you didn't serve? We're like, maybe you just didn't get picked.
Yeah, didn't get
same thing with Vietnam. Like, not every eligible man went.
Right.
But
on her side, I mean, her dad's dad probably served, but he was a mayor in Clear Lake and everything, but I don't remember.
Again, not technically a military post.
Now, her dad was old enough to serve in Vietnam, but I don't think he did. I don't know why I don't know this. I'm sure if I talk to her later, she'll remind me and I'll remember all this stuff. But
my brother could have served in Vietnam, I think. Like maybe the year he turned 18 was the year it stopped. It was right on the thing because my mom always tells the story about her getting ready to flee to Canada with him because she was terrified. I don't think he cared or knew, but she was all set.
Yeah, a
Hello,
lot of them.
everyone. Welcome to Magical Talking Cat Podcast, the only podcast in the world who is having a really bad week because we only liked the racist parts of Dr. Seuss books. I'm Tony.
And I'm William, and this is episode 520, which means if you've made it this far, then you have enjoyed 10 full years worth of the Magical Talking Hat. Next week will be our anniversary episode, but technically that means it's the first episode of our 11th year. This is the last episode of our 10th year. Congratulations, 10 years. Maybe you should re-examine the priorities you have in your life.
Wait, did we start on the 11th? I thought we started on the 17th.
We did, but you know, a person's birthday is actually the first day of their next year.
Yes, right? yes. But this is a full 2 weeks before the anniversary.
Oh, is it? Did I miss? No. 520 would be. Wait, what day is it? Is it the?
I mean, it would be 52 weeks times 10.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay. But I mean, 10 years isn't exactly 52 weeks.
No, you're right. Actually, 10
years isn't exactly 520 weeks.
There's also no 0 episodes, so maybe I am jumping the gun. Maybe that's next week. So you have to don't stop now. Go to next week. Then it'll be 10 years. Then you can quit.
And then you should reevaluate your priorities.
Then you should reevaluate. Not yet. Do it next week.
Hold on. Just don't give up drinking now because there's going to be a great party. But then after that, really get your life together.
See, that's how it works, people.
Yeah.
This is why you listen for this good advice.
This is a pre-intervention. We're worried about you that you're putting so much effort into this, and we have a lot of evidence. But the crux of our evidence won't happen if you don't listen for another week.
One more.
Keep up to bolster our argument that you should stop.
Then you can stop. But just one more. Wow, how did I forget? How did I forget? Oh, because of the 52. That's right. I got it mixed up. I always forget the part where there wasn't an episode 0. That always messes me up. So I'm always one ahead of where I should be. Because,
it's weird because I don't think I've ever forgotten that there wasn't an episode 0.
Maybe we should have had one.
I mean, in my book, they're all 0s.
Well, and also though, one has to think about other things like, so we have one episode it's a numbered episode, new. But it's not new.
But it's not new. Yeah.
But we actually there's also 1 week where we had nothing because we recorded an episode and it crashed or something, and we didn't replace it with something else. So technically,
and there was 1 week that we had an episode and it crashed, and then we recorded another episode, the infamous episode 12.
Yes. So how does
depending
that
on your definition work? Of what counts as an episode.
Right.
Also, you and I have had conversations, a great many of which we've never recorded. So do those count? I mean, because there is no difference here. Like, for those of you wondering, like when they're not on the air, no, it's the same. And again, when I'm talking to William, not recording it, I still, my larger concern is to the silent audience that I imagine is there than to anything for him.
That's kind of true for your whole life, though,
I will stop him. We'll be having a meal together and I will stop him and say, "You're boring the audience." And he'll be like, "That's just you." And I'm like, maybe you're right. I can't tell. But the point is,
I do kind of picture you at some point in your life, you were taking over with this idea that your whole life is being watched by an audience. And so everything you do is as if an audience is watching.
I mean, I'm already leaning in hard to solipsism. So I don't think it's that tough. Most of the mental health issues I have had in my life are enthusiastically self-induced. I'm just like, that seems fun. Let's do that.
Let's do that. I
Um,
think that's true for the people who listen. Who again, you must listen one more time before you seek help, because that's just how it should work.
because your punch card's not full yet.
Yes, you got to fill the punch card.
Next week is when we break it to you that we don't actually exist, and this has all been in your head. So tune in for that. For those of you just joining us, you probably feel like you're missing out on a larger saga, and you are. Shame on you. But to explain it, how this works, we have a hat. It is magical in that it has its own email address, themagicaltalkinghat@gmail.com. And I don't think we have the lag tonight. That's pretty awesome. Folks, cool people, awesome people, people with mental issues, as we've said, people who really need to stop after a couple of weeks. Write in to that email address, themagicaltalkinghat@gmail.com, with little notes, comments, topics, questions, that kind of thing. The hat magically, all on its own, transmogrifies those emails into little note cards with the information written physically on them that manifest within the hat itself. It's completely imaginary, servants draw the note cards out of the hat at random, read them on the air, talk about them till we're bored, do that for about an hour. That's the whole show, except the parts that aren't, which is the bulk of it.
Someone would really have to be disturbed to make us up, though, really.
I mean, yeah. What if only one of us is made up by the other one?
You've already posited that. You've said that
Have
it was
I?
all in my head. Yeah, that you had a...
I think that makes more sense. I think it's way more believable that you invented me in your head than that I invented you.
Well, why? You just wouldn't have invented me? Is that what you're trying to say? It's like I just
for a second, I was like, does it look like my camera froze? And then I'm like, you got a goddamn ceiling fan in the back.
That's right. Sorry, ceiling fan.
Absolute clod. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm being just a little hubristic there. I don't know.
I think I'm the easiest one to make up. I think I'm boring. I'm predictable. I'm sort of.
Oh, but I didn't say easy. I said likely.
Well, I'm just saying the easier I am to make up, the easier it is to imagine that it could happen.
I think in my head, if it exists, you make me up because I'm essentially your id. And I'm like, you're definitely not mine, but I'm like, so are you my variant of a super ego? And that could work.
I think my id is even more boring than you, honestly. I don't think
I'm your id's id.
I'm not sure you represent my id, because I don't think my id is that interesting.
Deep-seated subconscious that wants all the things you're scared to admit. I'm that thing that it's scared to admit it exists.
Yeah, it's probably the most I could give you was that. I'm not even
Tune
sure.
in next week when we find out I am William's pineal gland. So, no, I'm not even gonna start on this. I need this can't. I have to center myself. I have to be prepared for this. This can't just come off the cuff. So I have to ask. First thing, have you watched any WandaVision?
Well, I mean, I watched Krypton. Yes, I watched WandaVision, you dork. And Krypton, but I watched WandaVision.
You watching Krypton is fine as long as it's not in place of something good.
Krypton was good. It's too bad it's not going to get a third season. I really liked it.
Are you caught up on WandaVision?
Yes.
All right. Finale's tomorrow night.
Yes.
How do you feel about WandaVision?
I only liked the last episode. The rest of them I didn't really like. The last episode was really good.
The last episode filled in a lot of interesting things. I think in some ways I disliked the last episode the most. I mean, I still liked it, but I think it was one of my least favorite episodes.
Really liked it.
Why did you not like the others? How did you make it all the way to that episode if you didn't like the others? Why didn't you bail after like 2 or 3?
I mean, that's actually a very good question.
I liked it.
Yep, good one. Thumbs up on that question.
Good night, everybody.
Well, interestingly, and this has happened to me before on similar kinds of shows, the length of the episodes make it really easy to go, we can watch one more. You know what I mean?
No, that is legit a thing. Yeah. I am keeping up with Kenan Thompson's goddamn sitcom that just came out called Kenan. It's fine. Like, I am not going around recommending it to anyone or anything, but in the space of a week, I can go to Hulu and be like, yeah, I'll kill 22 minutes. I'll probably laugh a couple of times.
Yeah, it's like that.
I get that.
Yeah, it's like that. And
is your wife's reaction involved at all? Does she like it?
I think she likes it less than I do.
Oh my.
So that's one thing. The other thing is there's not very many of them, so I mean there's more than, I mean, when you add up how much time is involved, there's actually a lot, but it just doesn't seem like there's a lot.
No.
So that kind of goes with it.
We tried to push it on the HBO 30 coins thing. We have officially given up on it, but that was a big thing too. Is like, well, it's only short, we could just see it through. No, I get that.
And then another thing was I didn't hate it. I mean, it's like, I wasn't completely uninterested in quote unquote, where is this going? I mean, it's like, okay, let's watch the next one, whatever. I mean, it wasn't, so that's another thing. Another thing was there wasn't, at the moment we were watching it, there wasn't any other show kind of really competing with it, so to speak.
Fair.
It's like, and last of all, given that the stakes were so low, it seemed reasonable for the sake of the conversation we're having right now to go ahead and just watch them all.
So I didn't bleed out the eyes or anything. Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. All right. Now I can deal with this. I have a sister who didn't like The Good Place, and I still speak to her. So I have a friend who just recently decided, hey, maybe Pose isn't that bad. And admittedly, I did go off on her. But I can cope with this. And this is not, I'm enjoying WandaVision now for its originality and for what it is now. I'm not saying WandaVision is one of my favorite shows at all time, so I can cope with this. Speak to why you didn't particularly like it, please.
It's mostly,
because you are literally the first person in existence I have heard say that.
It's mostly, my experience with it is very similar to when I was watching several of the Harry Potter movies, which was, I feel like people who are familiar with this material are going to love this. But for me, it's like, Easter eggs mean nothing, right? I mean, and sometimes I can tell what is an Easter egg because you can kind of get a sense that that's Easter eggy, but you don't know what it is. You just know that you just have a feeling that all the fans are going nuts right now, but you're not, because you don't really know what's going on. There was a lot of that. I mean, every single episode before the last one seemed just thick with that kind of thing where it's like, I know that someone thinks this is amazing, but it's not me because I have no idea I know that there's a thing. I know that it's an Easter egg. I can feel it, but I don't know what it is. So it means nothing to me, is what it felt like. Most of it did until the last episode.
Now, I find that very interesting because I am fairly confident in saying I know, or at least knew. I've looked at some videos since a little bit, but knew as little about these characters and the history as you did going into this. I didn't get all the Easter eggs, and I had the same thing where like I recognized the Halloween costume. No, but like most, and since then, like I found a lot of them are way in the background, like this character that is common to Scarlet Witch's history that didn't show up in the show, but there's this thing in the background you can see and stuff like that. But I didn't know them either, and so yeah, they were wasted on me, and I still loved the show.
Well, I mean, maybe that kind of thing bothers me in general more than it bothers you, but
I could see that. Well, and I could see a thing where I could see almost sort of being affronted, like a way that it could be seen as exclusionary. And I didn't experience that with Harry Potter because I always read the books before I saw the movie, but I know a lot of people did experience that, including my wife at times. And Harry Potter straight up, there are things that don't make sense unless you know what's happening in the book.
Well, and another thing is, one of the things I liked about the last episode a lot was Vision. Since they showed Vision in a previous, like flashbacks of Vision, he acted more androidy.
Yeah.
And the rest of the show, he doesn't act particularly androidy. He just acts like a regular person. I mean, the fact that he's an android seems not to matter at all, except that he doesn't eat, and he has to hide that from people. Yeah. It's like, that's not interesting. So
I did like the last episode, we got a glimpse of the time period between Age of Ultron, when Vision is created, and whatever the next MCU movie was, when they're just a couple now. I like that we got a little bit of the courtship, because that has always, and what I didn't realize is this is part of the comics thing. Scarlet Witch and Vision have been a couple in the comics, and I didn't know that. And so it was nice to see a little bit of the in between. So that was nice.
I just loved that conversation they had. I mean, to me,
I'll bet, yeah,
that just made that scene all by itself made it worth watching the whole thing up to that point. I mean, it didn't make the previous episodes better. Like, I don't want to go back and watch all the previous episodes again, but it definitely made me feel like, yeah, this was worth watching up to this point, because that conversation was just fantastic in so many ways, and it appealed to me personally in so many ways. Mm-hmm. So I really liked it, and it made me glad that I'd watched all of it, and I hope that the finale is satisfying in some way. But I really liked the last episode a lot.
I just realized something. Your first point might still apply in a way I hadn't considered. You felt there was a lot of inside information and Easter eggs that you didn't get regarding Wanda and Vision and their sort of Marvel history.
Well, but also certain characters, like,
yeah. Well, and I didn't either there. No spoilers, but yeah, I know what you mean there. How about, in my opinion, there are a lot of Easter eggs and homages and things to sitcoms throughout it. And one of the things I very much enjoyed is knowing every time they did a new era of sitcom, I could feel I knew which sitcoms they were parodying, like specifically.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep.
Did you get that? Or did you? Okay. I don't know what your history is with sitcoms.
It's pretty extensive up to the 90s.
Okay.
And then I don't.
I thought maybe that would be, because that's a level that I also appreciate the show. I thought it was really fun watching them parody the style and being like, oh yeah, that is so dead on this sitcom with a little bit mixed with this and this thing that was very much of the era.
Yeah, I mean, Dick Van Dyke Show, Family Ties, Now when they got to Bewitched, yep. Yeah. When they got to when they eventually got to an episode that was, I think, riffing on things like Modern Family and
we eventually got the one that had Breaking the Fourth Wall. In fact, I think that was the title of the episode.
Mhm.
There was some Modern Family. There's also some Office level. The
Yeah.
one before that was very heavy. Malcolm in the Middle was a lot of what came out of that one.
Sure.
But
sure.
also just sort of that era of the late 90s, early aughts.
I thought I thought in the one that was like Breaking the Fourth Wall, like you said, that one showed me that I like Elizabeth Olsen as an actor. Did I say that we have the same birthday? She and I have the same birthday.
You did not. You did not.
I think she was
I
born on
assume the same date. She's younger than you. Yeah.
Yeah, February
Okay.
16th. But anyway,
I never can tell with actors. So
I think she's a good actor. To me, when I watched that episode, I thought to myself, if I was a producer, I would know after watching this episode that I should never cast her for one of those kinds of shows because she wasn't really very good at that thing, talking to the camera. And
it was a weird, yeah. And it was like that episode, even, I mean, obviously with the whole run of the character, but even with the rest of the show, that episode is wanting you to act in a way that is nothing like any other way they've wanted you to act.
This is exactly right.
So I could see that being like it. Now, I don't know. So Elizabeth Olsen is the younger sister of the Olsen twins.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Kate and Elizabeth and Ashley. Sorry, Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. And she was in, obviously the Olsen twins started as the little girl on Full House, but then they went and had their whole own thing, and they had a lot of their movies and songs and stuff. She features a bit in some of the early ones.
I've heard that, yeah.
And recently people have unearthed some footage of like the Olsen twins in some movie where they're going off an adventure, and their little sister Lizzie, played by Elizabeth, wants to go with, and they have a whole song / rap about how their little sister sucks and they don't like hanging out with her. And it's, when you know who it is, it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So I encourage you to look for Olsen twins, Elizabeth Olsen diss track out there. It's pretty funny. And the show's giving Catherine Hahn regular work, and I adore Catherine Hahn.
She's really good in it.
She's amazing in everything she does. Yeah. A lot of what she does is playing the sassy friend in a romantic comedy, and so that annoys the shit out of me. So a whole bunch of stuff she does I don't want to see, but everything she does really well. Yeah. And this one has been fun. She's sort of I feel like she's almost a little bit of a sort of a barometer in the episode. Like, things are focused on Wanda and Vision, and then every episode you sort of get to see her because she's the neighbor, and you sort of get to see her for getting a little second of an outside view. And so that was very cool that way. Again, no spoilers. Well, yeah, I'm okay with you not being as into it.
One of the boys is from Hill House, right?
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Let's be careful here. We're dangerously in the spoiler territory, which is too bad, because there is a hilarious sort of Easter egg in it that I'd like to talk about, but it involves a major spoiler, so I won't do that. But I might tell you off the air that I thought it was funny because it was something that I don't know well enough to notice, but then everybody else. And that's the thing. The internet has gone crazy in this. I have, like, that. We always had to watch it immediately. Like, we watch it on Friday because the next day YouTube's like, oh, such and such can be seen in the background and things, including ones that I'm like, now having watched almost the entire thing, those were bullshit in some cases. And occasionally they'd make reference to things. I'm like, I don't even know who that is. Also, Cracked recently did 4 Scarlet Witch storylines that were way too bonkers to even use in the show. And they are really bonkers. And what cracked me up is they did it when there were still some episodes left. So they're like, don't blame us. if the last couple episodes bring these things in, but they would not. These are things that like don't make sense even in comics, or things that are like too gross for Disney to let happen. But yeah, again, I can't spoil things, so I shouldn't say anymore. All right. Other than that, how is your week?
It's good.
Is your wife
I
still
mean,
playing Control?
Like I say, we watched that. We watched the rest of Krypton. We've been watching things. Mm-mm. I mean, she might get back to it, but I mean, we just been watching stuff like the Muppet Show.
All right.
We've been watching that. So yeah, we just been.
And you
watching
sent me that
TV.
really creepy song. I made Trish watch that.
It's dark, man. Muppet Show is dark,
Yeah.
and I remember it being dark, and I remember liking it, and I still like it. But it's like the problem with me now, and I said this to you in email. The problem with me now is everything feels too soon. Like we're still in a pandemic. We're still these things are still happening. So dark humor just doesn't feel funny anyway. And that was like shocking almost. And it's like, whoa, this is way over the top. Which 3 years ago, if I'd seen it, I probably just would have laughed and thought it was funny. But right now it feels like a little too much.
I was just blown away. But
and the thing is, there's a lot of adult humor in the Muppet Show. I think a lot of people forget that it was a primetime show. I mean, it wasn't.
And that's the thing. I was like, "Why are you showing this kid?" And I'm like, "It was primetime evening. Come on."
Yep. Primetime show. It was made with adults in mind. A lot of times, there's a lot of adult stuff that happens, adultish stuff. Talk
kind
about
of like Erie, Indiana.
What's that?
It was a TV show that I never watched. I recently watched the Toy Galaxy video on it. It was basically, it looked like it was Goosebumps right before Goosebumps came out. But in reality, the show was meant to not be targeted at children, but at sort of all ages. And it just happened that the protagonist was a 13-year-old, and so they didn't ever really know where to put it, and that was part of why the show didn't do as well as it might have.
Well, the Muppet Show, nobody in the States wanted to do it because puppets were kids, for kids, and nobody thought puppets would work primetime, which is weird because before the Muppet Show was ever suggested, there were like animated things in primetime.
Yep.
But whatever, so nobody would do it, so some financier in England decided, and that's why it was shot at Elstree Studios in England, and that helped them all have like European and English guest stars quite a bit that American audiences didn't even know until they were basically on the Muppet Show. So that was interesting.
Just last night, actually, I ended up rewatching, and in fact, I bought it on Amazon because it wasn't that much. The Riff Tracks cut of a movie called Rock and Roll Nightmare, and it's a standard slasher thing that involves the devil. But you reminded me of it because for some reason the devil has like little hench creatures that are just these little one-eyed puppets that are like almost cute, and so even during like the big scene against the devil and stuff, there are these little puppets sort of in the background watching. And it's kind of ridiculously adorable in its way, but at the same time, really gross because like they all have slime coming out of them, and one of them is disconcertingly phallic shaped. But I remember because the Riff Track guys, there's one point where there were two and they had these weird wigs on them, and they were like, "Hey, it's Statler and Waldorf." But yeah, they were like really shitty Muppets. So it just reminded me. That movie's terrible, by the way, but hilarious.
It doesn't seem like it seems like there should have been movies that we were watching that have come out. Like we do want to see, but we haven't seen Judas the Black Messiah or whatever. We haven't seen.
Oh yeah. Watch that. That's fucking amazing. I don't know that you have a lot of time left, so you might want to get on that.
Exactly. I'm afraid that these are those movies that are being released in the theater on HBO Max at the same time, and so you only have a short amount of time to catch them. So I do want to watch that. I hope we get a chance to. What about the rest of your week?
We've talked about the new Mortal Kombat that's coming out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure my views on that I'm very excited for it. It's not going to be good, people. Not
Yeah,
possible, but I'm
that's what
very
you.
excited.
That's what you said.
Um, I've been still playing a lot of Witcher. Really digging this weather. I've been taking some walks and stuff, and that's been
Oh,
awesome.
sure, sure. Yeah, snow's almost gone.
Um, yeah, we're gonna hit the 60s this weekend.
Mm.
And more excitingly, we're gonna have lows in the 40s at night. I love the idea of that so much. All I really want, well, like I said, we decided not to do 30 coins. That's fine. All I really want to talk about is I saw two movies of significance besides Rock and Roll Nightmare. And one of I think I'll talk about the less significant one first. It was a Shudder exclusive that came out recently called The Wicked and the Dark, I believe, or maybe The Dark and the Wicked. I don't remember. And Trish and I watched it last night because we were trying to come up with a movie and we didn't really have anything. And I was like, I got some scary movies. I had new ones had come in on Shudder and I had seen some videos talking about one. And for some reason, this one seemed to really appeal to me. Something about it. It's a farm horror movie. So there's a farm out in the middle of nowhere with an aged father who's in essentially a coma, I guess, and an aged mother taking care of him. And then weird stuff happens, and the brother and sister show up, and then evil, evil. Um, it was really bad. And it's weird because some of the production values were really good, and it had really good people in it. It had Marin Ireland, who people will know from a lot of places. I know her as the housewife who had the thing with Ellen Page's character in second season Umbrella Academy, Sissy, the housewife. But she's also been in some other stuff. Trish knew her from earlier things that I hadn't watched, and she's a good actor. Here's what I will say about the movie. I don't understand what happened. Full stop. Like almost nothing is ever explained. And there's a lot going on, not explained. And more, and this was the thing that hit me early on in the movie, or at least midway through, when I still thought they might explain things. I don't get what the point of the movie was. Even the shittiest horror movie, I know like why they're wanting me to watch it. Frequently, there's a very overwrought, obvious, heavy-handed message, the hubris of man, or, nature will always win, or, you get what you wish for. That's, 90% of them are that. And even when that's not there, I'm like, oh, they just did this movie to show off these cool gore effects, or they just did this movie as an excuse to show a lot of nudity and goofy sets or whatever. I don't understand what the point / message was of this movie at all. I don't understand what we were getting at. I don't understand what happened or why it happened or why I would care. Also, the movie is set on a goat farm where most of the goats are actually quite obviously sheep. And that is the thing that most pissed Trish off. She's like, you can have mixed flocks, but they're just acting like they're all goats. They talk about them like they're goats. No, most of those were sheep. There were some goats. Most of them were sheep. So bad movie. Don't do it. Bad movie.
That's funny.
The other movie you may have seen a lot. This movie has been getting a lot of buzz and things. And we started watching a different movie, and then we decided 15 minutes in that movie looked like it sucked. So then we switched to this, which was what Trish had wanted to watch originally, but she couldn't remember the name. The Farewell. You heard about this?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
It stars Awkwafina in a dramatic role, very much a dramatic role. It's listed as a drama comedy. It's not a comedy. It's one of those that's like, yeah, there are a couple of funny bits. It's a drama. It's definitely a drama. And I was very intrigued because it had what is to me a very original premise to deal with. It is semi-autobiographical for the woman who both wrote and directed it.
Mm.
And it is the story of a 30-something American woman of Chinese descent who moved to America when she was, I think, 6 with her parents, and is now 30-something. And her grandmother, who still lives in China and who she talks to regularly and is close to, has stage 4 lung cancer. And the entire family has decided, as a family, not to tell grandma. She does not have long left to live, and they have opted not to burden her with this so that her last months will be happy. This is apparent.
I think I have heard of this. Yeah.
This is apparently, at least based on this movie, a not uncommon practice in China. And Awkwafina's character, first of all, originally wasn't even told because they didn't trust her to keep the secret, but also is very unhappy about the idea of keeping the secret. And they all go to China under false pretenses to get the whole family together. And it becomes one of those films about dealing with your family trauma and shit when you're older and all of that. Trish liked it. I did not dislike it. I felt it was mediocre. And I feel like most people will not agree with that. And I have tried to sort of suss out why I was sort of underwhelmed. And I think there's a big component in that this kind of family shit doesn't work on me. I am not going to say that my family didn't have issues and that we don't have trauma in our past, some of which has been processed and some of which has not. What I will say is it never matches anything they make movies about.
Mm.
Like, I am one of the few people I know whose trauma from the past is my parents were too supportive and loving. Like, and it's a real thing. Don't even get me started. But like, that's not what people have issues with. So and you know me anyway. I have my really severe ego boundaries, and the whole obligation to family thing in general doesn't do shit for me. So I didn't relate on that level. Outside of that, I was really excited because to me this was a very unusual initial premise and not something I'd ever seen before, because off the top of my head it seems like a crazy thing. Like this is the story of a bunch of sociopaths. What is wrong with these people? But it is not, and it is done fairly and realistically, and it is based off of a real thing. And at one point there is actually a short monologue in which someone gives what I think of as a fairly valid argument for doing it. I still don't know that I agree, but they give one that actually makes sense to me, and I'm like, oh, okay. But overall it felt like every other damn movie where you're grown up and you go visit your family and you deal with all the buried shit that's there. And I mean, not just down to the way it was written, the lines that were said, the way it was shot. I'm like, I've seen these exact shots in every other movie like this.
Mm-hmm.
A bizarre soundtrack choice involving a lot of operatic Italian stuff, which just didn't fit well. And I mean, maybe it's because it's of particular significance to the creator, and that, but I'm like, the whole thing just felt very mediocrely written and very mediocrely directed, and therefore I felt like a lost opportunity. I don't know, but it wasn't bad. I'm not sorry I saw it, and it's fine. So if it sounds like it would interest you guys, watch it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit worried that my TV and movie senses broke a little bit, that I've seen too much deconstruction stuff. So I either can't enjoy something because I'm picking it apart, or I have to do that where you just shut off all those functions and then just enjoy it for whatever it is. and I don't like if those are my only options. But I watched the pitch meeting for Dark Knight Rises again, and that movie was bad.
Yeah.
I'm fine saying that movie was really bad.
Yeah, it was really bad.
Mm.
I
I knew it
don't
at the
know.
time, but yeah, it ages worse. It's bad.
I don't even know if I've seen it more than once. I was just so crushed with disappointment when I saw it. I was like, well, that's too bad. This was a really good run there, and it was going to be a good trilogy, and then it wasn't. So
I talk about when I see movies in the theater and I walk out and like I still think I liked it at first, and then over time, I'm pretty sure Dark Knight Rises is one of those where I was really stretching it. Where we're walking out, I was like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, it's good. Like I think it was a matter of moments before my brain was like, "Okay, come on here." Like I don't like there have been other ones that I mean, hell, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen lasted 6 months. I don't know how, but I walked out of that movie thinking it was good and maintaining that it was good all the way until I purchased the DVD and sat my wife down to watch it, who had not seen it. And about halfway through, she said, "This is not good." And I said, "You're right. And I don't know what happened. It's terrible." And to this day, I don't know what happened. That movie's bad. I don't know why I thought otherwise, but yeah, I don't know how or why I got onto that, but there you go. Should we draw a thing? I think we're almost done, so we probably should. Magical hat, tell us the lesson that we should learn. Moral number 5. From Dave of Id. I had some friends. Oh, shit. We got to talk about that. Sorry, Dave. Something did happen this week. GammaCon. GammaCon happened this week.
Oh.
And I played in it.
Oh, okay.
It was pretty cool.
Good.
I played in 2 games. The first of which was set up as like just a fantasy game. We were going to go kill a dragon. And we did it over Zoom. And I got to play the cat with the PhD in arcane studies. Apparently I was a former Mage's familiar, and so I was Dr. Fluffykins, and that was pretty fun. But what happened is, so we had to go into this dungeon to find this dragon and kill it, and so we read this spell thing that would get us into the dungeon, and then we were just embodied in a field of white, and we couldn't see ourselves or each other, but we were still conscious. And then we could see this layout of a area, and then we could sort of move our consciousnesses around in it and then move to other. And it turned out basically the spell hadn't finished and we hadn't really gotten through. And so we spent most of the game trying to figure out how to fix that while we were disembodied. And it was weird. And then eventually we got through and we killed the dragon. And afterwards, the GM explained that he tried to create a game that felt like being stuck in a Zoom meeting. And I would say he succeeded, but it was pretty hilarious, but absolutely bizarre. And it's a little bit of a downside. And I've had this problem with this guy before. This guy is a brilliant GM, but I frequently play at cons specifically to get tools and experiences to then take to my group, like new perspective, and trying out new systems is a big one for me, but also just new things and how another GM works and how I can do that. And a game like this, it was super fun. Nothing I can use at all. It's such an isolated one-off thing that I'm like, I had a great time. None of it is helping me in the future of GMing. And then the other game was cyberpunk thing with a bunch of mecha and stuff on a system called Bolt, which is a fairly new system. It wasn't a great game, largely because I feel it was a very inexperienced GM, but also it was only a 2-hour slot, which is just not enough time for this kind of crap. But I was very intrigued by the system. It's fairly simplified, and the setting was interesting. It's a standard sort of 80s cyberpunk thing, but it incorporates modern social media. So like we are sort of vigilante criminals fighting against the giant robots of the mega corporations for the people, but we all have social media presences, and like we are financed via our followers and things like that, and donations and stuff, and that certain things we have to do in light of that, and like there's a resource we can use to improve certain things by spending points based on our follower base. But in the process, we do think like we take requests, like we say catchphrases when we punch, because somebody requested it, things like that. And it was a neat idea, I think, and the system was neat. So I'm gonna look more into those, but the experience was not great. So kind of the opposite of the other. But some of my friends played in David Vid's game, Darkwell, which is something that he has been putting together for decades, trying to sort of fine tune the perfect system for it. And so I played in one of his from that a long time ago. And they sent me a screenshot of all the new charts and stuff, and it looks interesting. But David Vid's game's always awesome. All right. Now, his questions, always awesome. Let's find out.
He asked me about Arthurian. He said that he thought he heard that I knew some things about Arthurian legends, and I told him, yeah, I know a little. I wish I knew some more. And then that was it. I didn't know if he had a question or if he wanted me to help him with something or play a game.
It's another thing. He put your picture, your headshot, on a cork board next to a 3x5 card that says Arthurian legend, ? Crossed out ? Double underline. And then he took a piece of red yarn, hooked it to there, and hooks over to other things.
Other things, okay.
Yeah. I can't discuss the others.
All right, thanks for explaining that to me.
Yeah.
That's good.
And he just stands there for hours on end, just looking at the whole
just
wall.
Looking at it, yeah.
What's the pattern? What's the pattern? And in line with that, Dave's question is, what's the hat's favorite position in yoga?
I'm not really familiar with those positions, so I guess I can't say. It probably has something to do with a cat. Or
Why?
maybe that's its least favorite position. Because when I was going over there, I would often see a cat sitting on the hat.
That is true. That is true.
So maybe the hat liked that or didn't like
the hat magically transmogrifies those emails into little cats with the information written physically on them, manifest within the hat itself. Maybe grab it by the scruff.
Maybe there's a cat-oriented yoga thing.
I don't. Yoga's tricky.
Do you know anything about it? I mean, do you know positions and stuff? And
I know a little. I mean, I couldn't do any of it, but I know a little. Trish has done it a lot. And I also know a little bit, like, it's a little like neo-paganism. There are things that go back, but really what we know of as yoga started in like the 60s and was largely made up by a small group of people. And there are a lot of very complicated Hindi terms for various positions, but then there are also the English terms that most people use. Like, weirdly, downward dog was not originally called downward dog in English over there. Or like my favorite pose is Shavasana, also known as corpse pose, which is just where you lie on the floor on your back. It's frequently the last pose you do as like a sort of relaxing thing at the end, but it's called corpse pose. That fitness game I got with the ring had technically some yoga poses into it that I was starting to do, but I don't know a lot about them. And then I know some of the crazy ones. Crow pose is really impressive. I've never seen Trish do it because I'm not sure she has, but she's seen pictures. She showed me pictures of it where like your legs are bent and they're like up above. You're on your hands and your legs are like sort of around. It's very difficult to describe, but it's also very difficult to do in my opinion. But suffice it to say, you are resting all the weight of your body on your hands, and the rest of you's kind of curled up in the middle. And you kind of look like a bird with your legs as the wings. I suspect the hat's favorite yoga pose would be the most complicated of yoga poses. Not necessarily the most difficult, but the most complicated. Because the hat is a magical hat of talking. And so the hat would be most interested in the pose that requires the most discussion, I believe. Which also means the hat's favorite yoga pose could be whatever one is the most culturally appropriating yoga pose, because that would require a whole lot of talking of different sort. So, if I'm honest, the hat probably does not have a large interest in yoga, but I don't know. I feel like if the hat had a larger interest in yoga, it would have finally let us die and moved on to other servants, because we clearly don't know anything about it.
Yeah, you'd think.
I also don't know if the hat has an interest in Arthurian legend, though. We'll have to find out. I stuck some Arthurian legend in my sci-fi game recently, in like a lazy way. In the galaxy spanning empire that used to exist in the game that I'm running, they developed what they called synth cultures, which is where people would find a new planet and basically decide they were going to build their society like sometime in history or some fictional society or whatever. And there were certain laws that they had to obey across the board. Like, you couldn't have a society with slaves in it unless people opted into that position and had the ability to opt out and leave if they wanted, things like that. But otherwise, you can kind of do what you want. But this game is set after a major collapse of this empire. So there are some worlds that had these cultures that are now like really doing it. And we recently had one called Camelot, in which the administrator of the whole planet was called Arthur Pendragon. And I'm realizing now how incredibly uninteresting that is, but it's about the end of the show, and I didn't really know what else to add. Actually, no, that's it. Never mind. I thought I had more. No. Oh, I do. It's not any better, for the record, than what I just said. But one of the things that made me paying attention to Toy Galaxy, because I remembered it and I watched it, was King Arthur and the Knights of Justice. Did you ever see King Arthur and the Knights of Justice?
No.
It was a great show. The show was It's King Arthur times. And King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table are fighting against Morgana and a bunch of guys that are like also knights, but they're evil. But I think they were made out of stone, like her magic made them. But they're like the counterpoint. So they're like, the same action figures in different colors. And they have special abilities and shit, because of course they do, because that's how you get action figures. But all of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table get kidnapped and imprisoned in ice or something. And so Merlin, with the bad guys at the gates, does a Hail Mary, pun intended, and searches the entirety of time and space for someone to come and defend Camelot. And you know who he finds? An American football team called the Knights, whose quarterback is named Arthur King. And he pulls them through time to Camelot and gives them cool armor and weapons and shit. and makes them straight up pretend to be the original knights of Camelot. Like all the inhabitants of Camelot think they're the same people. And then they have to fight the bad guys, and their goal is to free the bad guys, and then they can go back to their own time. And they made toys based off of it. And I really enjoyed it, and it was super 90s, because when you think about that premise now, it's so bad. But it was very at the time.
It seems like it just been easier for him to free the ones that were in trouble.
No, you need to add the keys of truth, I think, and we were in a big hunt. Everybody wanted to get the keys of truth, the MacGuffins of destiny, to do it.
So it was hard to free the people who were trapped, that it was actually easier to pull a whole bunch of people through time.
Yes, I mean, it makes as much sense as that the most worthy and useful people through time were a football team that also happened to be called Knights, that also happened to have a dude named Arthur King. And I think one of the other star players was named Lance. And he was the one who became pretend Sir Lancelot, which is weird because like the peasants must not have known all the knights' names, because we had King Arthur and we had Sir Lancelot, but like we had a dude named Sir Brick, and like nobody questioned that. Like I remember times when like peasants would talk to Sir Brick and call him Sir Brick, and I'm like, there was not a knight of the Round Table before called Sir Brick. So is it just like how nobody knows what the name of the drummer from Coldplay is, but if he's there with Chris Martin, you're just like, yeah, he must be the guy? Is that? We also had Guinevere, who I think didn't know it wasn't her husband. I don't remember how that worked. That was fucked up. But it was great. It had cool toys, like Visionaries kind of, which was another one of those, which also had a Merlin. A lot of Merlins. Anyway, this has been wonderful, people. 10 years. The mind boggles. You should feel bad, but we should feel worse. So, you know,
yeah,
cope. We're doing all right. You also should.
Yeah.
And I mean, listen again next week.
You have to, because that's the real 10 years, and then you can quit.
Because we're concerned about you, and we can't properly express that until you've crossed the finish line of horrible pastimes.
Right.
And then you'll be properly awful for us to express concern. I got to admit, I'm not entirely following how this is going to work, but listen next week.